Motivation comes from the most unexpected places. It doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers. It may not even come when you're ready for it, but when you need it the most. And that's what makes it so powerful. When I was 12, my world revolved around school, friends, and a seemingly insurmountable fear of failure. Math tests, piano recitals, and soccer matches felt like monumental events, defining my worth. Failure loomed large, whispering doubts into my young mind. Little did I know, the lesson I needed to overcome this fear would come not from a textbook or a coach, but from an old woman with a weathered face and sparkling eyes. Her name was Mrs. Foster. She lived next door in a small ivy-covered house with a porch swing that creaked in the wind. Every afternoon she'd sit on that swing, knitting scarves or reading faded paperbacks. She always smiled when she saw me, her eyes crinkling like she knew secrets about life that the rest of us couldn't even imagine. I often saw her as I walked home from school, shoulders slumped under the weight of another disappointing grade or a missed goal in soccer practice. One day, noticing my tear-streaked face, she called out, "Why so glum, young man?" I tried to brush her off, mumbling something about a bad day, but Mrs. Foster wouldn't let it go. She waved me over, her knitting needles clicking as she set them aside. "Come sit," she said, patting the seat beside her. Reluctantly, I did. Over the next hour, I spilled my heart out to this kind stranger. I told her about my fear of failing, of letting people down, of not being enough. She listened, nodding gently, her hands folded in her lap. Then she said something I'll never forget. "Do you know what failure is? It's not the end of the road, my dear. It's the signpost pointing you to a better one." I didn't fully understand her words then, but she went on to tell me her story. Mrs. Foster had dreamed of being a ballerina. She worked tirelessly, rehearsing for hours, sacrificing friendships and free time. But a knee injury ended her dream just as it was within reach. For years, she said, I thought I had failed. I thought my life had no meaning. But life has a funny way of surprising us. That injury led me to teaching, and I discovered my true purpose, helping others find their passion. "You'll fall many times in life," she continued, "but each fall teaches you something. You learn how to stand taller, how to walk straighter, how to run faster, and eventually you realize that failure isn't the enemy, it's your greatest teacher." Her words stayed with me. Over time, they became my mantra. When I bombed a math test, I didn't let it define me. Instead, I asked myself, what can I do better? When I lost a soccer game, I focused on improving my strategy rather than wallowing in defeat. Years later, I faced my biggest challenge yet, applying to my dream university. The rejection letter hit me like a punch to the gut. But as I sat on my bed, staring at that letter, Mrs. Foster's voice echoed in my mind. "It's the signpost pointing you to a better road." So I picked myself up. I applied to other schools, explored new opportunities, and discovered passions I never knew I had. That rejection, painful as it was, led me to a path that felt more authentic, more me. Looking back, I see how much Mrs. Foster's wisdom shaped my life. Her simple words taught me resilience, a lesson I carry with me to this day. Failure doesn't mean you've lost. It means you're learning. It's a reminder that every stumble, every setback, is just a step toward something greater. Mrs. Foster passed away a few years ago, but her legacy lives on in the hearts of everyone she touched. Whenever I face a challenge, I think of her creaky porch swing, her knitting needles, and her unwavering belief in the power of perseverance. So, if you're struggling, if you're doubting yourself, remember this: failure isn't the end. It's the beginning of a new, unexpected journey. Embrace it, learn from it, and keep moving forward. You never know where the road might lead.